Jason Khalipa. He does variations of keto, and he was a 2008 CrossFit Games world champion. The guy is no joke, a total beast, and he's big into nutrition. So we're gonna break down his diet, but we're also gonna go and work out. And you're probably wondering, what the heck happened to Thomas's voice? Well, funny story. Some really nice guy was burning and cutting a bunch of poison oak in our backyard. So guess who got poison oak in their airway and gets to be on prednisone now? What a blast. Anyway, it's not gonna stop us from getting a killer workout. It's not gonna stop us from talking shop. Let's go spend a day with Jason Khalipa. What's up, dude?
What's up, bro? Hey, man, how you doing?
Good.
Nice to see you.
I'm a little hoarse.
Yeah, it's not a good day for filming, huh?
It's gonna be what it is.
Yeah, it's all good. Welcome to the gym. So the way this gym is situated, we call it a 2-floor model. Now, COVID kind of threw a wrench in the system, right? Where we used to have both classes running concurrently. Now we operate this as a traditional location, like one floor, and then we have the open gym until we start to develop, until the classes start to fill up, and they're definitely moving in the right direction. But once they get to a place where this one's at capacity, then we'll start running 2 classes concurrently. We no longer use it as a full-time office, but just as like a place where you do like podcasts or whatever. But eventually, what my goal would be is to get this place back up to speed as the gym starts growing and regulations shift. Like build this thing out in like a really cool like meeting room and podcast area with like cool artwork about like our past, and like this is a throwback to this is called a pig. It was from the 2013 CrossFit Games, and we turned it into a desk. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of, but yes. So that's my goal for up here, right? Is to make it more like a throwback to like where we came from. So like 2008 all the way to 2022, but. We haven't done that yet.
It's badass, man.
Funny story. Next time you see Dave, you got to tell him this. So, in 2009, we did a major hill run at his ranch, and his ranch is just like just open. And so it was a 10-mile run or whatever it was, and at one point you had to climb this mountain on your hands and like feet because it was so fucking steep. And so we're climbing up, and anyways, I ended up finishing the games. The following week is my wedding, and 3 days after, I start seeing poison oak show up on my hands from touching the floor. And so I show up to my wedding, and I had luckily it started to go away by then because I got some topical cream. But dude, I got poison oak from that. It was just like a really experience at Dave Castro's ranch. So the next time you see him, you talk to him about poison oak. Yeah, thanks, Dave. But that sucks that you get it right in your throat. So maybe we could just go through a little like EMOM session. Actually, you know what I could have you do? I mean, if you're up for it, do you think? I mean, it'd be pretty hard, but it'd be a 20-minute EMOM. It's one that I call we call it death row. It's 20 cal row and 15 burpees. It's hard. It's 20 minutes long. We can do something like that, or we can switch it out and do like a 3-minute EMOM with like this and 2 other exercises more like not as crazy. But that one, if you've never tried it, it could be a good test for you.
It's brutal. Huh?
Where's your head? Like which?
Let's see. So 20 minutes, every minute on the minute, alternating. So 20 cal. By the time you're wrapping up 20 calories, you're pretty much there.
You're there, yeah. So you got push, you got super control the row, and the 15 burpees, you gotta just work to your heart rate back down. It starts off pretty easy, and like around minute 14, it gets really hard. But if you wanna do something like a little, that's like pretty challenging, that could be it. And then we can go from there and work on something else. Or we can do something completely different. I mean,
I'm game for that. We'll see.
You wanna try that? Yeah, okay.
Sure.
I think this a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you're super strong. Maybe follow my case, harder pull, and then breathe more on the way back in. Might help you.
Okay, perfect.
So reach in, hard pull on the way back. Try and get 1 calorie per stroke. a little more, you might get a little bit more drive. Yeah. There you go. Dude, right? Right?
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah. How'd you like that?
That was killer. That was really good.
So, Thomas is in pretty good shape. That's pretty surprising that you could just walk in here and do that. I mean that like because a lot of people, they don't know how to pace appropriately. So they go too hot. They could probably do it, but they go too hot. He didn't go too hot. Nice and steady.
That's a lot of years of, I ran my first marathon when I was 11. A lot of years of endurance training.
Yeah. But to hit that mark every single minute on your first try, it's a great accomplishment, man.
Well, I could learn a lot on the row, man. I think my issue is, you probably noticed this disconnect where I tend to let my knees go with my, instead of elbows, knees.
Yeah, so a couple of things I noticed if we want to get into like the nitty gritty. You're like a size 14 shoe.
I'm 13, it's huge.
Bro. So a couple things. Whenever I'm intervaling with the rower, I never strap my feet in if I'm intervaling. So what I do is, I've gotten used to, so what you learn is you go like this, in, out, then you try in, and learn how to do that. So when you sit on the rower, you can sit, boom, but when you get out, it's fast. So every second counts on this particular workout.
Yeah, for sure.
Something else to think about is the damper. So when you have the damper on like a 10, you get here, watch, listen to this. So when you hear the damper on 10, listen to the flywheel and then listen to how it cuts off. So watch this. It goes really up and then straight down. Whereas now, listen to it on a 1.
Yeah, where you go with this?
So the problem with it on a 1 is that a guy like you or me, if we have it on a 1, we never get the full potential out of our pull because the turbine, the flywheel, you're catching it when it hasn't reached its potential, right? So meaning if I'm here, I don't take out the slack until about right here.
Just done 2 reps for 1 basically.
Exactly. Now, if I do 10, the problem is it's like starting from scratch every single time. So it's like rowing through the water with a giant oar, but every time you're starting from 100% scratch. What you want to do is find a balance. So for me, it's somewhere in like that 6, 7, and 8 range. Probably the same thing for you based on your height and your strength. And what you want to do is you want to listen to the rower and you'll hear it, watch, listen. So here, it goes up. As it starts to come down, I hit it. So it'll look like this. Right? And you hear it, where it doesn't reach the bottom, but it's also not the top. And so you can have this beautiful cycle. Now when I row, I think about 3 positions. Position number 1 is my start position. Okay, what I'm trying to do is keep my upper and lower back flat. I'm trying. And the reason for that is that if I'm here, all the power that I'm driving out of my legs is gonna be dispersed in my arms like a shock absorber. So instead, I wanna coil back so that all the power I'm driving can go straight to the handle. That's my first order of business. As I extend my legs, this is position 1. Position 2 is I open my hips for power clean, and position 3, I finish here. Now on the return, I do the opposite. I go 3, 2, 1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And that's how you move this in a straight bar path. So at times in the workout, maybe I'll mess around with something, but if I'm really going for speed, I won't do up and over the knees because it reduces, it increases the range of motion, right? Instead of straight in and straight back. So 3
That makes
positions.
perfect sense. Yeah, that's definitely, it's a, years of trying to break that weird pattern, that neural pattern of wanting to just almost pull it into like a like a weird squat form, you know, versus getting that rhythm.
And if I can, I'll just add one more thing.
I'll take it all, man.
So if I'm going like long distance, and so like in the CrossFit Games, I won the rowing events that I've competed in because I had a lot of exposure to this and I had great coaching and all that stuff. But I also learned that different dampers do me well for different things. So if I'm going for like a really long distance, like I rode a half marathon one time at the CrossFit Games, I had that damper at like, let's just say a 4 or 5 because my stroke, I'm gonna weaken in my pure strength, stamina, but I could increase my cycle time if the damper is lower. So, but if I'm going for like a sprint, it's completely different. So watch this. If someone's been trying to hit like a PR 500 meter.
We're on this side so you can see the screen. Yeah.
So if someone's trying to hit like a PR 500 meter road time, okay? At least to see the lowest number they've ever seen on the screen for a short period of time. Instead of, so if I'm going like 500 meters, let's just say I was actually going 500 meters, I'd probably do, let's just say you're going like a really good pace. If I was going for a 100-meter sprint, I wouldn't come all the way in. I'd stop right here. And the reason for that is I want my position to look more like a deadlift or a sumo deadlift than I would a squat. So imagine right here, I get to recruit all my posterior chain. And so if I'm going for max, like let's just say max in 10 seconds, right? So I get here, looks like this, watch. Right, so 112. It was moving a little bit. I've gotten it down to like 109, but it's a deadlift, it's aggressive. Whereas if I'm going for a little bit longer distance, right, I might come in, right? And I might have more, I'm trying to get more potential out of my foot.
That makes so much sense. That answers a lot of my questions. Yeah. It's always been an issue. So it's not a huge deal to have these fastened down crazy tight.
No.
Okay. Because I get hung up on that sometimes.
So like, I rarely, if ever, strap those in. I've also tried to learn how to row without anything to learn how to control my stroke and so that you're not relying on the straps, right? You're relying on just your body.
Because otherwise I start fatiguing into the outs. It's like weird places.
Yeah, so if you can try and row without any straps, you can probably still do it, I bet. But I really think about recruiting my hip. Yeah. So it's gonna feel weird without being strapped in.
Yeah, exactly.
But you should lean back about 3 more inches.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be your finish position. Because you wanna open the hip a little bit.
Okay.
Right, so unlike what is this, T-bar row, right? So whereas like if I'm rowing here, this is my position, I'm looking to recruit the hip a little bit like a power clean.
Gotcha. That makes way more sense. Yeah, because I have such a wacky posterior chain to begin with just because of my back injuries. So it's like, in a protective sense, don't want to lean back, but it's all mental.
Yeah, it's just the same thing as like like I said, like a power clean or, getting that hip engagement a little bit more. But yeah, that was impressive, dude. Good job.
How the burpees look okay?
Dude, I was just trying to stay. Your burpees were fast. You're fast. You're very fast at those burpees, right?
I just have a lot of, my upper body is definitely fast when it comes to that. Definitely could use some work down here because I've been a long distance runner, so everything is pretty slow twitch down here. I never, it's in an effort I rarely squat over 315 because I like to run too much. So I don't want to.
So like some things that I do, obviously like sled pulling, sled dragging, reverse hyper work, but also like a stamina building back squatting.
Yep. I
don't know if you want to do that, but something I do pretty often is I'll do like 10 sets of 10 with a partner, or even 5 sets of 10 at 135 or 95 of speed squats and just build up some leg stamina. I found that that's been really helpful for me. Something else that's been really helpful for me for like rucking and long runs would be like sled pulls and developing time on my feet and hamstring strength. Yeah. So it's 3 sets. So at NC Fit, like at our gyms, we have 3 main programs. We have NC Metcon, which has some snatching, has some complex gymnastics. That it's for someone who wants more variety in a GPP program. Then we have NCX, which is just fundamental strength conditioning. So every day you do some type of like strength work, like back squat, whatever, and then you do a workout like what we just did. Then we have NCFLEX, which is more of like functional functional strength and bodybuilding program that's not like as like a intense, but more volume and more aesthetically appealing. So what we're doing right now is a piece of an NCFLEX workout, which is 3 sets, max reps of DV bench press, immediately into 1 minute diamond hand planks. Like so you and I could just grab some benches and some DVs, we can do this. What do you think is a good weight for max DV?
For how many reps?
Like just max, I don't know.
Well, what's the heaviest we got?
Well, what are those? 75s? 95?
Should be going down.
We have 2 95s.
What's the over under here? I think at least, I don't know, 20 maybe? His upper body is like,
Let's see.
like a tank.
What's that? Jeez.
Now today's video is sponsored by a company called ButcherBox. They are a really cool grass-fed, grass-finished beef delivery company. They don't just have beef, they have chicken, they have fish, they have shellfish, scallops, they have chicken thigh, they have brisket, they have everything you would think of. Super high quality, delivered to your doorstep. Honestly, their ribeyes are the best ribeyes I've probably ever had, and I've had a lot of really good ribeyes. So that link is down below. So if you're finding ways to get new protein in, finding ways to get your meat in, try and find ways that are gonna, I don't know, spice up your diet a little bit, check them out. And then it's delivered to your doorstep in just a couple of days. Super easy. And if you like scallops, I'm telling you right now, their scallops are some of the best scallops I've ever had as well. So that is right there down below in the description. That is a special link that'll get you access to ButcherBox. They've been a big supporter on this channel for a while. So check them out after this video. Get your hands on some of that. Seriously, it's epic. Okay, so it's 2000. It's so funny with my voice. All right, I'm going through puberty.
You gotta do the double horn.
So I'm going through puberty here. Okay, so it's 2008. You're at the CrossFit Games. What are you seeing people eat?
So a lot of people might not know this, but one of the major sponsors of the 2008 CrossFit Games was Panda Express. So, you know, people were eating back then, and even for many, many years, right? In general, you know, I think zone and paleo became popular through CrossFit, but the athletes, you would think they would be like pinnacles of fitness, having broccoli and chicken breasts and brown rice, but ultimately we were training so much that we were just consuming calories throughout the day that we could find. And at night, I would really like double down. So I competed professionally in CrossFit from 2008 till 2016. And so, 8 years. And during that time, I tried a lot of different things. I tried zone, I tried paleo, I tried this, I tried that. Ultimately, what worked for me was I would do fasted cardio in the morning. I would eat a decent sized breakfast. I would then not eat again pretty much until I trained again, where I would have like half a perfect food bar right before I trained. Then I'd do my training midday. So I did fasted cardio in the morning, training midday. Then I would go home, and right before I went home, right before I had dinner, I would do like a 15 to 20 minute stamina building workout, like 10 pull-ups every minute on the minute for 10 minutes, as an example.
Got it.
And then I'd have a really big dinner. That's what I typically did. And the dinner was the only like meal throughout the day that was like pretty healthy.
Gotcha. So, I mean, if you were to look at what you do differently now versus then, but also factoring in how your training might be different now, like what does that look like?
Well, right now, I mean, I was telling you, so I've been only eating meat and some fruit, more animal-based. So I've had some avocado, meat, eggs, and some fruit for 26 days. And that's new for me. Normally for me, for the last X amount of years, because of my training volume, even now that I'm not competing, I feel like my physique was okay. It was what I wanted. And so I'd have like, I would eat normally around like 11 o'clock. I'd have some type of like basic breakfast. I would then work out and do different things. I'd work out in the morning, work out midday, and then I would have some type of lunch, and then at night I would still have a big dinner, and then I would always snack late at night. It was a bad habit of mine. So for the last 25 days, I haven't been doing that, though.
You notice a difference with it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what I noticed eating just meat and like a moderately lower carb, I'd say, for sure. Yes, I have some fruit, but getting rid of all dairy, all gluten, and all legumes has really made my gut feel better, my mental clarity feel better, and my energy be like on point throughout the entire day. And I'm wearing a CGM, so it's been interesting because I've been able to see my blood sugar levels and maintain them versus spiking and then crashing.
Yeah, totally. So how long have you been wearing the CGM then?
Couple weeks.
Okay, so prior to doing any kind of, you toyed around with keto a little bit, I know, because you followed me for a while. Were you ever doing keto during your competition days, or was that more so when you were getting into the kind of the recovery piece?
Yeah, so I didn't do keto. So when I was training, our big philosophy when we were competing, and still to this day, if I was competing, like I'll go compete in jiu-jitsu, for example, is I'm gonna eat the way I want on competition day the same way. Like I'm not gonna change anything on competition day just because like it's competition day. Yep. If I'm gonna do that, I should do it months in advance so that my body can get prepared for it.
Totally.
So, but from a CrossFit perspective, I never had any specific meal plan that I was following, and I never went keto. We never went like high fat, high protein. I would have more of a balanced approach to it.
Yeah, and I think it's just now getting to be something that people are starting to look at in the CrossFit world, because up until even a couple of years ago, I mean, it was really difficult to comprehend that keto could be done in a performance setting. There's always sort of been this backlash against it, where if you go keto, you're not going to be able to go glycolytic, you're not going to go anaerobic at all. Whereas in reality, now you and I have talked about being able to cycle in carbohydrates appropriately, carb backload, adding carbohydrates at the end of your workout kind of thing. So, I mean, which
is really interesting. And then look at insulin sensitivity and what impacts that plays on going keto, right? Like, anyways.
Well, I mean, it makes sense when you look at someone that's doing CrossFit. Their workload is so intense, it is difficult to even wrap their mind around, whatever little nuancy things they need to do with nutrition. When your output is that much, it's just like you said, it comes down to, okay, how much can I get in me? How much fuel can I get in me? And like getting down to the granular with these little teeny things. I think now we're finally at a point where we are evolving in such a way with nutrition that we understand that bio-individuality. Like you might work well on keto, another CrossFit athlete might not. And being able to accelerate and try different things for different approaches, we're really at that stage now, which is cool because up until recently, the CrossFit industry had like zero interest in my content whatsoever. But now in the last year or so, I've seen just an increased interest. Probably because nothing is going to, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but the ketogenic diet, as far as endurance work goes, is pretty tried and tested. And there's a large portion of obviously the CrossFit community that still wants to improve in that medium. So it's like, I think you have to look at, okay, what is your strong suit in a CrossFit setting? Are you going in as an endurance foundation that has to build upon your strength? Or are you a strength athlete that has to build upon your endurance? Like, where's your strong suit? And I always say, feed the stallion, starve the pony, right? So if you're good at endurance and that's where you're gonna take a lead in a CrossFit game type setting, you should feed and nourish yourself with what you are good at to really optimize and feed that stallion, so to speak.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about CrossFit now is that from a competitor perspective, let's talk about that, is that the competition's gotten so evolved. So like in 2006, when I was first introduced to CrossFit, it was like wild to think about doing a double day, meaning like 2 workouts in a day. It was like, dude, you did a double day? Like, it was insane. Then in 7, 8, we kind of like overcorrected. We just thrashed ourselves from like 2008 till 2012. Then athletes started getting smarter, and now they're finding, dude, you got guys now that are training for 6 hours a day, but in a very smart, calculated way. And a piece of that is, how's my recovery, how's my hydration, how's my nutrition? We didn't really think about that early on, but if you want to be competitive and win now, your training volume is so high that you have to stay in tune with what your nutrition and your recovery looks like. These guys are training, because you know what's interesting about CrossFit is that, let's just say you want to get good at basketball, okay? You spend time on the floor and you're getting good at that. Then you do your strength conditioning to help you with that, and that's great. Or let me rephrase that. let's just take running. You want to be an endurance runner, so you focus on that. What are you going to do to make you better at running? Well, the challenge is in CrossFit, you want to be that plus swim, plus bike, plus lift, plus everything else. And so the volume and the duration of exposure, like how many hours you have to expose yourself, becomes so long that nutrition becomes a major factor. Not that it's not in other sports, it just is becoming more and more in the CrossFit space. And on the keto thing, I just wanted to note something. So my wife right now is going keto. She's been keto for 25 days. Because for her, it's not about performance, it's about weight loss. Yeah. And man, she leans out like that when she goes into a state of ketosis. That's really, really interesting. It really works for her.
Well, I mean, for weight loss, number one, I mean, I think that's putting people in a box where they can just say, okay, carbs are off the table, period. It's just psychosomatically, it's easy. And I think that's when I went through my weight loss transformation, that was a big piece for me too. Just put me in a box, put me where it's easy, put me where I don't have to think about anything else.
Right.
And then you can get into, once again, all the nuancy stuff I talk about on my channel all the time, which may or may not even apply because it might just be so out there and make it so intense that it's too much for people. But yeah, when you're talking about the world of general weight loss, absolutely. But I think, even the work that I do with, the military and special operations, there's now an interest in, from a performance setting, okay, how do we look at keto? But we also have to remember, even with CrossFit, you're switching back and forth all the time between aerobic and anaerobic. And that concept of being what's called dual fueled or metabolic switching, where the mitochondria can utilize carbs very, very well, but can also utilize fats very well.
Yeah.
I literally cannot think of a sport that it would apply better to. And that doesn't mean that everyone needs to do keto. And I'm not, people that watch my channel know that I don't push a keto agenda. Like, I'm all about doing what works for you and being able to lay keto as a foundation for a lot of people. But if someone is trying to be able to, I use the analogy of running at a sprint on flat ground and then take that flat ground and all of a sudden run up a hill. Okay, by starting to run up that hill, you're switching from aerobic to anaerobic, right? A good testament to someone's fitness level is how quickly they can switch from aerobic to anaerobic. Not necessarily the ability to, but how quickly they can switch and how short their period of oxygen debt is.
Yeah.
And I have noticed in my own anecdotal experience that if I am in a keto state, I'm obviously going to be strong in an aerobic sense. But if I occasionally dabble in carbohydrates and allow my body to be good at both, I can transition. Like the workout that we did today was largely aerobic, but definitely tapped into that anaerobic state too. And you and I both, probably because of our diets, can really shift really well with that and stay in that middle ground, that gray area where people normally have a lot of difficulty.
Well, I think what's really important is that people should find out what works for them and test different things. So for me, I don't want to say regret, that's not the right word. I've never had an interest. Like, my interest was always in training. So I've gone out and I've met with the best coaches in powerlifting, Olympic lifting, you name it, because I wanted to get really good at these activities. But now that I've been out of competition, I spend more time doing jiu-jitsu and our workouts here at NCFit, like, I'm really interested in optimizing myself, right? So that means, how do I feel? How are my energy levels? And I found that when you go more towards that keto-ish, right, I feel better, and that's what's motivating me right now. Yeah. Is not so much the performance. I think the performance is there too, but it's more so about how I feel. And I think people who haven't given it a shot need to try different things for a couple weeks and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a long tail piece with it too. It's like, how long do you want to do what you're doing? Because there's no denying that if you are loaded on carbs, yes, there is a performance advantage to a certain degree. Okay, I'm not denying that. Like, I'm very open about that when I talk about that on my channel too. It's like, yes, there is a time and a place. And for highly anaerobic athletes, carbohydrates work very, very well. But you also have to look at it from literally how much reactive oxygen species you create when you are metabolizing carbohydrates. And if you're looking at doing something for a very long period of time, being able to run on a fuel that is literally cleaner, and looking at it from a longevity perspective, looking at it from a recovery perspective, you have to weigh in inflammation as well, right? I mean, ketones by their very nature are anti-inflammatory. They're inhibiting nuclear factor kappa B, they're inhibiting what's called the NLRP3 inflammasome. So all these things that are going to be long tail markers of poor recovery. So if you're after a workout, you obviously want a little bit of inflammation, but you don't want so much that you're not able to actually recover, right?
Yeah.
So again, it looks at the volume of training and being able to get adapted. And one of the things that I appreciate most about, like you mentioned, doing double days, you mentioned even when you were training for the CrossFit Games, you were still at that point in time doing fasted cardio.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Which a lot of people are still opposed to regardless, right? I'm sure.
Which I still do today.
Yeah, I think there is a big advantage, not necessarily even from a fat loss perspective. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole and there's a discussion there, but the fasted cardio piece, it's all about mitochondrial fat adaptation. By being in a fasted state when you do your cardio, you're forcing your mitochondria to tap into a stored fuel source.
Yeah.
And that alone is conditioning. You got to think about how we are conditioning mitochondria to be able to switch.
Well, I like that. And then obviously I like the mindset piece. Like I like, in terms like Mark Bell, is like putting points on the scoreboard early.
Yes.
So like what I do, this is just me, is I get up, so I wake up at 5:30 every day, and I wake up my daughter at 6:10, and she walks on a treadmill in the garage, and I ride the bike, and we just do that for a little bit, and then she'll go back inside, and I'll hit the next like 20 minutes just on my own or whatever. Harder, but that's like our thing to start the day. Yes, I'm fasted because I also want to just get right in and get going and feel like I'm just like winning the day already.
100%.
So that's another factor. Yes, I agree. Like the fasted idea is probably going to incorporate, my body's probably going to utilize, find ways to create energy and use it differently. Yes, but then the mindset piece of just knowing that you already got that day started, that's what I love about it.
No, totally. And when you are doing double days, it makes a lot of sense to be able to do one workout fasted and one workout not. One of the things that it's a difficult subject because it's fairly nuanced and complex, but essentially, I don't know if you've heard of the like train low studies or the sleep low studies, if you remember those, but essentially it was saying that if you train in a relatively deprived state and then compete in a higher state, like in terms of being fed or deficit, you can train in a lower state, train in a deficit, and you're going to compete in not a deficit and ultimately be able to perform better. When you're training doing two-a-days, I did a video specifically on this, do one of your workouts fasted, one of them not, right? Because then what you're doing is you're essentially conditioning, once again, the cell to be able to do both.
Yeah.
And people think it's one or the other. And again, I understand people don't always have the time to do two workouts, but if you can have the best of both worlds, like if I ever have an opportunity to train twice a day, that's exactly what I'll do. One workout will be fasted and one workout will purposely not be fasted, because that not fasted workout allows you to, once again, be able to utilize fuel in a different way.
Yeah. And for me, like when I talk about double days now, it's like when I was, my normal training protocol for a long time was morning cardio that was like aggressive and fasted. Midday was like more like 2-hour strength conditioning session, and then evening was stamina building work. That was very common for many, many years. Then once I stopped competing, I would then do jiu-jitsu about 3 days a week. I do our class workout every day. So I do our class workout every day. I do the morning stuff is just kind of like my own thing. But the training volume is pretty high. But what I wanted to get to, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up is that from a nutrition perspective and from a movement perspective, something that I've found helpful for me is loading up a ruck, and I know that you're gonna be doing this too, or you do this too, and taking calls while I'm rucking has been a nice way to get in some movement. And so if people wanna do that fasted, they could do that as well.
Totally. Yeah, that's a huge fan of rucking, just because, I mean, you're still sitting in that lower intensity, even when you're rucking. You're just having a different metabolic load. And when you say aggressive cardio, when you were doing like fasted aggressive cardio, like what did that look like?
Like what we did is an example of like that would be a fasted aggressive cardio, meaning like burpees, row, like hard intervals for like anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. That would be aggressive cardio. Non-aggressive would be like long, slow distance training on the bike at a moderate pace for extended period of time, or rucking with a pack on up hills, maybe 40, 50 pound pack at a moderate effort,
Yeah, because I mean, the higher intensity in a fasted state can definitely be, tapping into a different state, right? You're driving adrenaline levels really, really high. You're getting glucose mobilized a lot more, whereas at a lower intensity, excuse me, this is ridiculous.
You got your water.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna help.
Oh, yeah.
There's no voice whatsoever, so I am a prepubescent 12-year-old girl today, that's fine. Just call me Thomasina. Anyway, so, if you're sitting in that range where you are, in that lower intensity range, you're obviously going through beta oxidation, utilizing fats a little bit better. So
people get this notion where they shouldn't be doing any kind of high intensity work fasted because you're not working in that fat oxidation range. When in reality, it's conditioning your body to be able to mobilize properly.
Well, and for me, like I can't eat. So like the reason why I would have big meals at night, and this goes for like most of the high level competitors, is because throughout the duration of the day, you're training hard. It's hard to eat a full meal, especially if it has like excessive carbohydrates and whatnot, and then go train. I just feel too full. And so now, because I'm mainly eating meat and fruit, you can pretty much eat that whenever you want, and I still feel like I can go do whatever I want. But when I was really doing high intensity, like really high intensity, it's hard to have a full meal and then go and do that. You know, my go-to, I don't know why this worked for me, I'm not quite sure, but the Perfect Food Bar, it had a nice balance. I'm not sponsored by them, and
That's a good bar for sure.
But I haven't had one in weeks because I'm not having them. But is the protein, fat, and carbohydrate blend was really interesting in those, especially in competition. So what I would do is I would like nibble on it to give myself like a little bit of that honey, like initial, like carbohydrate, because they have like honey, and then they have the peanut, and then they have a little bit of protein from like built in. I feel like those were good energy sources for me, but that could have also been always in my head.
No, I mean, it's a good balanced bar when it comes down to just getting the job done.
Right.
So, I mean, I think when you're looking at a performance setting, when you're just moving massive load and this energy balance is all that matters, I think you probably could have eaten a dog turd and it probably
right, yeah.
You know, it's just, it comes down to really being able to, like, I think nutrition in the world of like high intensity activity is largely overlooked either way, because you're looking at like, what's the difference between running on, let's just hypothetically say 97 octane versus 99 octane. It's such a negligible difference, but at the same time, it's a negligible difference. That's the difference between winning and losing. Right?
Yeah.
So, but it's also a time thing. And I find this with a lot of professional athletes is so much time and attention is put onto training that being able to have the time to dedicate to nutrition is just practically impossible.
Yeah.
It just is. The other side that we run into is not being able to have the time to experiment with nutrition. Because when you have someone in a performance situation and it's competitive, you're telling me that I have to take a risk by eating XYZ and eliminating XYZ that I've been doing for 10 years. What if that doesn't work?
Right.
That's a 3-month, you're telling me it might take me 3 months to really adapt to that? Sorry, I just don't have that.
It's difficult. So if you're a professional athlete and you have competitions throughout the duration of the year, it's difficult to commit yourself to a specific nutrition plan that changes things because you don't have that much time to figure it out. That's what we're talking about. So for me, for example, in my final years of competing, I competed like every 2 or 3 months throughout the entire year because of the way the season worked out.
Yeah.
So what happens, right? You get off, so you get off like so for me it was like what's called the Open, Regionals, Games, where like the World Championships. Then for 3 years in a row at the end of my career, I competed for Team USA. So that pushed me out. It's like almost like going to the Super Bowl, right? So the rest of the NFL is off, but the Super Bowl is still, that team is still playing. So the problem is that when you're done with that, if you want to mess with your nutrition, you're not going to mess with it for that 9-month cycle, that 9-month season,
yeah.
Right? So then you only have a 3-month season, so it's 3 months off season to say, okay, what am I going to do? And at that point, you know, dabbling with stuff, it becomes scary. But I think now people are more open to it. But back then, we didn't really change anything.
Yeah, well, especially with something like keto, because you are literally putting yourself into a hormetic stressor state. Like you are literally stressing your body by doing keto. So like with some of the MLS soccer guys I've worked with, it's like you have to start it in the off season. Because there's gonna be an adaptation period. And like the shorter the off season, the harder it is, because any adaptation that's gonna occur needs to be occurring in that off season.
Right.
Otherwise you're gonna have a decline in performance. And we find that with keto in general, when you first go on it, it's not like you immediately have this amazing burst in performance. It's usually the opposite, and then it slowly progresses.
Yeah, my wife, you know, it's so funny because she started keto 25 days ago, I was saying, and dude, she had when she first started her workout, she was getting dizzy, she couldn't perform, like she was getting exhausted. That was like the first week or so, and then it starts getting better and better and better, and then she's now she's back to normal and all good. But it's funny how that first week or so, it's like shocking to her.
No, even the first month. I mean, it takes that mitochondrial adaptation, that true fat adaptation, that ends up taking like up to 90 days. So I know I keep saying this, sound like a broken record, but basically
for the mitochondria to change how it utilizes fuel from carbs to utilizing ketones, it depends on the individual. That could take 2 weeks, it could take 90 days. So like, unless you're willing to commit to this time, it can be so difficult. And again, it's just like for a competitive athlete, that's really, really difficult.
It's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because you're changing things a lot. And then what if you don't feel good? Then you can't train. And if you don't feel as good and your training isn't as good, then all of a sudden it starts messing with you a bunch of different ways, right? Psychologically, am I performing well, et cetera. The sport of CrossFit's evolved a lot. I don't know where it's gonna go. I also think that the sport of jiu-jitsu is really fascinating because I think the nutrition is just as important, I mean, as any other sport, but it's so aerobic and it's so aggressive and it's so quick. And I think that these guys should be paying attention to their fuel too. So
the cognitive piece.
The cognitive piece is just skyrocketing it. So that's something that I'm really interested in learning more about.
Yeah, because I think with, again, like working with military applications and things like that, that's what they're focused on. How do we, if you are predominantly glycolytic, okay, if you're not on keto, for example, and you push yourself to the extreme physically, you have no choice but to downregulate the glucose that's being used in your brain. It's just period. Like, right? It's like why you get lightheaded. It's why if someone asked you to do, algebra, or maybe something more advanced than algebra, but if someone asked you to do algebra at the end of a hard session or during a hard session, you couldn't do it. Okay, A, because your mind's not there, but B, because you just don't have the glucose in your brain. You have the glucose shuttling everywhere else. With ketones, it's a little bit different because ketones are always going to have a certain allocation going to the brain. So for intensity combination of like aerobic work, but also being able to maintain cognitive, that's where I think it's really interesting. And again, even like in a military application, that's what they look at. Okay, you look at, well, what's the best way we can potentially weaponize this so that people can perform at their best while still maintaining heightened cognitive function? Because you can't be in a life or death situation and lose cognitive function.
Yeah, that's interesting. So on that note, like, so if you go into, like, let's just say they're in a firefight, I imagine their blood glucose goes through the roof.
I would imagine so. Yeah, any kind of situation, whether it's professional athlete or whether it's going to be law enforcement, military, firefighters, anytime when there's life and death stress load, it's in addition to whatever life or stress load is coming from a workout, because you've got literally life and death as well.
Yeah, so like, now I wonder for, like, in particular for jiu-jitsu, or let's just say military, well, law enforcement might be a little bit different because they don't know exactly when they're going into a situation, but let's just say, whatever, let's just take jiu-jitsu. You're getting ready for a match. I really am curious if front loading with some like honey or different types of things would already provide the body with that glucose so that it wouldn't be as stressful on the neurological component there. Like, I wonder, does that make sense? Like, so instead of,
yeah.
So I wonder if that would actually help your ability to navigate the jiu-jitsu match, or for your case, the military or whatever, if they front loaded with some type of carbohydrate before that event.
Front load and even intra-loading when possible. So if you took someone that was fat adapted, that was doing keto.
Fat adapted,
okay,
right.
And you were to give them, let's just hypothetically say, glucose during a workout of some kind.
What if they weren't fat adapted?
Then the glucose would more than likely they would suck it up really quick and they might go hypoglycemic really quick. But if someone is fat adapted and they can utilize fat and ketones at the same time, okay, then you put them into a situation where they're going highly aerobic or anaerobic. You have what is called glucose independent facilitation, where independent of glucose or independent of insulin, that glucose can get taken up by the cell. So what that means is I could be pumping out a bunch of ketones, okay, because I'm doing ketosis, I'm pumping out a bunch of ketones, then I go into a workout, and intra-workout, during the workout, I'm sipping on a small amount of carbohydrates.
Right.
My body can suck up those carbohydrates without ever having a big insulin spike, because the simple movement of the muscles whatsoever will suck up glucose independent of insulin. Now, keeping in mind that ketones stop being produced when insulin is present, okay? So if I was in ketosis and I had a tortilla or drank some carbs, ketones would stop, okay? If I am actively moving while I'm consuming carbohydrates, my insulin levels aren't gonna spike up that much, because the glucose that I am consuming is getting sucked up immediately. Yeah. So I can potentially have the best of both worlds. So people that are high performance athletes that have the ability or the, I guess,
latitude to be able to do that. In like a combat situation, it might not be practical, but front loading can work too, as long as you're immediately going into a situation. So if I was saying, okay, I'm gonna go right into an 18-minute AMRAP, if I were to have a bolus of carbohydrates of say 30 grams in a liquid suspension prior to going into that, I could still be pumping out and creating ketones while having glucose circulating. So you really can have the best of both worlds. It's just how often do you do it? When do you pull that lever? Like when do you really want to mess with it? That's where the interesting research, I was just out in Florida with Dom D'Agostino and talking just about this. The research with exogenous ketones in a performance setting is very interesting, because what has never been really understood is what happens in the human body when we have ketones and insulin present at the same time.
Right.
Because it's normally two things that can't coexist. If insulin is present, ketones simply cannot be present. But with the use of exogenous ketones, they can. So all this interesting experimentation coming out where they can carb load guys, but then give them exogenous ketones and literally have both present. Carbohydrates, insulin, and ketones. And their performance is generally improving. So indicating that, wow, okay, maybe I'm not a big fan of exogenous ketones. I think they have a place, but they're yielding a lot of cool research when looking at them. So it's, like personally, it's become a newer thing for me, like 2 days a week with my harder workouts, to co-administer like 20 grams of carbs with maybe 10 grams of beta hydroxybutyrate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, for me in particular, it's the conversation we were having was with, it really sparked my interest because of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like my CGM goes like through the roof when I'm doing something that connects the brain with the body.
Yeah.
And that tells me that if it goes through the roof, maybe I could do something before that activity that could help me perform better. Yeah. So that's what I'm so interested in.
Yeah.
I'm very interested. I'm interested in all this stuff.
And like right now with you doing your fruit, when are you allocating the fruit within your diet?
So, you know, that's something like, my commitment for this diet was for 40 days to say, hey, I want to have discipline and I want to go meat and fruit. But I almost incorporate the fruit almost at every meal in a very small amount, right? Like we're talking like, 10 blueberries, 12 blackberries, an orange, like throughout the, like we're not talking about excessive amounts of fruit, but that's what it would be like throughout the day.
It'd be interesting if you tried allocating like 90% of your fruit immediately post-workout instead. And seeing what would happen. It all depends on the fruit, right? Because the higher the fructose content, a little bit less of an insulin spike. So if you went with something more like cherries are a really good one because they're a little bit, they're a decent blend. So like if you were to go like Bing cherries or something like that and have maybe like 3/4 of a cup of them. So you're getting probably 30-ish grams of carbs from that, but you have almost all your carbohydrates from fruit allocated post-workout and kind of backload. I wonder what your recovery would look like, because what you don't necessarily need for given your circumstance is a consistent insulin spike throughout the day. You with your workout structure, you'd probably be better off having one larger spike that you can manipulate and then letting those levels come down and letting ketones elevate. Because fruit, I'm all about fruit. My concern with having fruit sprinkled throughout the day is you're ever so slightly toning down like ketone formation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I like to see them go high and then have a clear, defined drop, and then come back up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, well, we were looking at the CGM earlier, so yeah, I mean, I'll show you. Yeah, we can pull this up later, but I think in general, right? Look at,
Yeah, we'll show this to the camera. Yeah, so that big spike is his workout, right? That's our workout earlier, where you have a big spike, and then it's pretty common after a workout to have a big dump like that, a big drop, okay? And what ends up happening, are you laughing because I said dump? Yes, after your workout, you take a dump. So it's pretty common after a workout to have a big drop in your glucose like that. And that's simply because he is insulin sensitive. So what happens is he's had this big increase in glucose that has come into his bloodstream. And then that big drop is his insulin response doing what it's supposed to do and sucking up the glucose into the muscle.
Yep, isn't that interesting? I mean, yeah, and then, yeah. So, I mean, that's a cool example to pull, right?
No,
I've been nerding out on this for sure.
It tells a lot. I think I always say on my channel that it's like, people freak out about measuring ketones, they measure all this stuff. I'm like, that matters, but the number one thing you should measure is your glucose, because that's gonna tell you more about your ketones then your ketones actually will.
Yeah.
Because it's a proxy for everything. Like if you...
Yeah. This, the world that we're talking about, for some people, it's like way over their head. For me, even, it's still like over my head a little bit, but it's more and more intriguing to me because watching the way like hormonally, how the body works and all these different things we're talking about, it's just fascinating because I think you could actually be really more efficient with your body and the way you work out and the way you eat and the way you do things to optimize the way you feel. And I think that you don't just need to throttle. Like my whole life, dude, I've just been throttling, like crushing my workouts, crushing myself all day, eating whatever I want. But I think there might be a smarter way to do that for the rest of my life. And that's what's fun about this.
Totally. And I do think like within a category, like your style of training, jiu-jitsu, CrossFit, anything like that, keto might not be the best way, but certainly some kind of application with time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, because that allows, I think if I had to say, okay, give me the best CrossFit athletes in the world, and what diet would I put them on? I probably would not put them on keto. Why? Because it's pretty tried and tested that you do lose some anaerobic performance without very specific guidance in terms of when to implement carbs. So much so that it would almost like need me or someone that knows what they're doing to really like time when they have carbs. If you want to get nerdy like that, heck yeah. But I think with intermittent fasting, it allows them the flexibility to be able to train in that super deficit, deprived state, and then still be able to have their cake and eat it too, right? So I did a video specifically on that where it's like, it's a tough pill to swallow for keto, but you can get a lot of the same metabolic benefit with fasting because you're really, the same common denominator is there. With intermittent fasting, the goal is to drive up ketones during your fasting period. With ketosis, the goal is to drive up ketones all the time. So if you can get yourself to be able to train in that fasted state deeper into a fast occasionally, it's almost just as good as being in keto. Like, and then you're able to backload and have 100, 150 grams of carbohydrates and get the best of both worlds. Because when you're looking at it from a performance side of things, you can't take a dogmatic approach. You can't be like, I do keto and only keto, or I do vegan and only vegan. Like, what are we after? Are we after sitting in a specific diet camp, or are we after optimal performance?
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, unfortunately, I've talked about this before, the keto world tends to be very dogmatic and very proud because it works. But they get so proud and so dogmatic that it can alienate others. And I think that, we can have a broader...
Do you test, well, I was gonna ask, so I've never tested if I'm ever gonna say ketosis. Oh, really? So how do you do it?
So there's two different ways, or there's multiple different ways. There's testing the blood, which tests your beta hydroxybutyrate levels. That tests your actual ketone levels.
It's like a finger prick?
Yeah. So, and then there are breath meters, which will measure what's called it's acetone, which is another byproduct. So when you convert ketones, or create ketones, excuse me, you have three different ketone bodies that are created. You have acetoacetate, acetone, and beta hydroxybutyrate. Okay, beta hydroxybutyrate is the primary ketone body that is researched, okay? So any kind of in vitro studies, anything where they're looking at the effect of ketones on a cell, or what's called histone deacetylase, or anything that's like gene expression related, all the cool stuff that's coming out, that is all beta hydroxybutyrate. When you test your blood, you're testing BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a great thing to test. But the one big problem with it is your body is going to create as much beta hydroxybutyrate as it needs. So that means that you might reach a certain point where the levels in your blood aren't necessarily indicative of what your liver is producing, because once you've been doing keto for a while, your liver gets good at producing just enough to feed your cells and nothing else. So a lot of times people do keto for a while and their ketone levels slowly start to drop. It happens to me, right? I measure my ketones, I'm like, shoot, I've been doing this for 12 years. Why am I only at a 0%?
That's why some people phase in the carbohydrates. They'll do that too, right?
It can improve the intensity of how much you produce ketones. But lately, I've been more into testing breath using good meters. I use one called the BioSense, which measures fractionated breath. Okay, so that's measuring the acetone. Now, acetone, the carbons that make up the acetone that you breathe out are directly derived from fatty acids that you're breaking down. So when I'm breathing into a breath meter to test my ketones versus my blood, I'm getting a very accurate readout of
how much fat I'm actually breaking down. So
that's interesting. I need to get one for my wife and for me.
Yeah, they're really cool. Well, and they're interesting because like you can measure, I would bet that 30% of the people that are in the classes right now, if they went through a 1 hour workout and they were even remotely low carb, if you tested their breath ketones, they'd probably be measuring ketones shortly thereafter the workout if they didn't eat anything. Because just an intense workout is gonna create trace ketones.
Yeah.
So I've seen that in the CrossFit community too. It's like their training load is so intense, especially in endurance mode, that they could be eating 200 grams of carbohydrates and still register ketones at the end of their workout because their workouts are just intense enough and they're draining all their fuel and the liver starts creating ketones. So I think it's a really good tool to use, ketosis diet or not, just to be able to know where you are.
Yeah, by the way, for those people who are going to be watching this video, we are at one of our gyms, which is why we're able to, and we have like this like window position where you can actually like look down and watch people just get after it, which is beautiful.
So I guess the long and the short of it is I'm seeing more and more interest from the CrossFit community, which is great because I think one of the beefs that I think people have had before, which is interesting, I've never really subscribed to that way of thought, but I've listened to it. People have had beefs with the CrossFit community because they say, oh, you're not open-minded, you're not willing to listen to anything else. Lately, I've been seeing a lot more open-mindedness coming from that in terms of nutrition, which has been refreshing. But one of the things with the OG CrossFit world is it required education to really understand what was going on. So from the outside looking in at CrossFit, it was easy to poke holes at it. Back in 2008, 2009, 2010, someone that is experienced with training could look at CrossFit and understand the dynamic and what's happening there. Someone that is inexperienced is going to be the one that might poke holes in how.
Yeah, of course.
And as time has gone on, I think with the advent of social media and more education surrounding it, it makes more sense to people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think functional training and dude, think about it. I think Greg Glassman and CrossFit have made kettlebells in hotel gyms more common, have revived Olympic weightlifting and supported in some way gymnastics. But the idea of I was talking about this the other day. When members come in now, or just people in general, and you ask them squat or thrusters or clean and jerks, those are much more common today than they were 15 years ago.
100%.
And the modality, the movements, the kettlebells, the sandbags, the dumbbells, they are also more common. And I think a lot of that has to do, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with these boutique gyms, CrossFit and other functional training gyms, bringing to life just how effective these tools and these movements are, dude, I don't care if you ask me for two movements that everybody should do, it's a thruster or a clean and jerk, or a thruster and a burpee. If you do thrusters and burpees, you'll get pretty damn fit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then, that's the thing I like, and then whatever auxiliary moves you want to do on top of that.
Yeah, of course.
It's just have your fundamental baseline and then.
Yeah, if you're back squatting, bench pressing, deadlifting, doing some type of hip explosion movement once a week, plus conditioning pieces. And then obviously if you want to get some supplemental, bicep curls and different stuff for more aesthetic appeal and hit these smaller muscle groups, go for it,
100%. All right, we're gonna go eat.